Christy finally showed up so we could have that discussion. So, my opponent says that she'd like to work with Republicans at all levels. Donald Trump is at one of those levels. I would love to ask her, what is she going to work with Donald Trump on? I don't want to work with Donald Trump. I want to defeat Donald Trump. I started a show called The Young Turks. We are proudly home of progressives, not home of moderates, not home of people who'd like to work with the Republicans. I founded Wolfpack. That is to get money out of politics. I co-founded Justice Democrats that proudly got the 4 strongest women into Congress: Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ayanna Pressley, Rashida Tlaib, and Ilhan Omar. And when I was co-founder of Justice Democrats, we invented something called the No Corporate PAC Pledge, which I am glad that my opponent took a couple of weeks ago. So now, look, there's policy differences. I am for Medicare for all. That is universal health care. It's the only thing that gets you universal health care. No co-pays, no premiums, no deductibles. Everything else says that you do not have health care as a right. I'm for the Green New Deal to create high-paying solar and wind energy jobs in this district. My opponent, on the other hand, her average last year was $2,700 from AT&T, Facebook, United Health. That is the largest insurance company in the world. Are you going to give that back? And are you for Medicare? Are you against Medicare for all because you mean it? Or are you against Medicare for all because United Health gave you money? She says she's not taking money now. She says she's not taking money now, but she's taking money from Goldman Sachs, BP, Wells Fargo, Sempra, and Koch
Time's
brothers.
Up. Thank you. Mr. Mercuri.
We had the government, when the government was shut down and he had shut it down, his poll numbers were going down. And he had said on the record that he wanted to protect Dreamers. That was the perfect time to extract that compromise from him. But Democratic leadership didn't do it. They let him off the hook. If I'm in the House, I'm never, ever going to let them off the hook. And I'm going to tell them, the reason you fight is not to vent, guys. The reason you fight is because it's more practical. When you have that moment of leverage, you must use it. On the other hand, Christy, for example, voted to deny undocumented immigrants Medi-Cal. Why did you do that? My God, that feeds into a Republican stereotype, by the way. Undocumented immigrants put more money into the system through the payroll tax that they never get back. They don't get the money back from Social Security and Medicare that they pay into. Let us protect all of us.
Time's up. Thank you.
The most immediate and realistic way to get us to universal coverage, that is access to care for every American, involves a few simple things. First of all, defend and shore up the ACA. Secondarily, create a public option that can be purchased by individuals on the Obamacare exchange, along with a group plan option available to small businesses. To Courtney's point, there are lots of small businesses who would love to be able to provide health care for their employees but haven't been able to. To Mr. Lozano's point, we need to create consumer protections in the system. Healthcare market is the one industry where consumers have very little protection and very little opportunity to have clear pricing indicators within that market. And then additionally, we need a substantial waiver program for Medicaid dollars that come from the federal government and allow states to be innovative and subsidize. And we will subsidize for everyone who can't afford a plan on their own. But we have to act with immediacy. This crisis is urgent, and that means we have to take the best path to get us there quickly, and that's adding a public option to what currently exists.
The problem we have right now is that we don't have capitalism, we have corporatism. And what that means is that the corporations have taken over our government. The way they did that is through campaign contributions. Do you know that the oil companies get $20 billion a year in subsidies? And you wonder why we have a deficit. Because they're robbing us blind. Those are the most profitable companies in the world. Why are they taking our taxpayer dollars? That's crony capitalism. If you get money out of politics, you can stop it. By the way, yes, Christy is taking money from BP.
Thank you. Time.
Okay. Mr. Uygur.
Well, I definitely haven't taken PAC money from somebody who wasn't in my party. I also haven't taken lobbyist money from anybody that wasn't in my party, like John Musella, who represents Chiquita Canyon Landfill. I didn't take money from Jeff Dunham PAC, which is a Republican PAC. So no, I didn't do any of that. But yes, 20 years ago, I used to be a Republican. And so the last Republican I ever voted for was John McCain in the primary against George W. Bush. The tax plan was an absolute disaster. It put a $1.9 trillion hole in our deficit. And I'd like to ask him, how are you going to pay for that? So the top 1% got 83% of those tax cuts. And by the way, here in District 25, that was not a tax cut. For a lot of homeowners, that was a tax increase. And in this case, the person who did that is Steve Knight. He voted for that, and he robbed us of our money and gave it to the richest people in the country. And when you talk about the deficits that are created by Republicans, and it is almost always Republicans that create deficits, look at the $6.4 trillion that the Iraq War and the Afghanistan War cost us. How are you going to pay for that? And Christy, no, I'm kidding. This one's totally a Republican fault. 100% Steve Knight and Republicans.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Assemblywoman.
Thank you. Well, I'm proud to be the only candidate on this stage, again, that's endorsed by End Citizens United and Indivisible because of my longtime commitment to this issue exactly. And my voting record is very consistent with that, and my contribution record reflects nothing like what's been expressed on this stage today. So I hope your stunt pays off. Secondarily,
Let her speak. Let her speak.
Secondarily, the system is broken. As a candidate, as a legislative representative, I'd like to be spending all of my time doing the legislative work and the work on behalf of my constituents. So we do need to get to a point where we engage in some form of either public match or public financing and provide a public platform with the technology we have now easily available to make candidates have time through an internet channel, through any kinds of other means to communicate with voters. But the days of us having to raise and spend millions and millions of dollars to communicate with all of you has to come to an end because it is corrupting our system.
Thank you.
So look, guys, I don't want to be impolite, but there are big differences between our candidates. And yes, Christy has gotten an F rating from 100 Democratic groups combined for her votes in the Assembly. The reason for that is she votes with Republicans all the time. And please, press, cover the issues, and I will give you all of the facts on it. But there's also a difference in how we fight. If you say, hey, I'm going to stick with the status quo, that's never going to get you the change you need. We did not get the Civil Rights Act and we did not get the Voting Rights Act by asking pretty please. That's not how it works. You create public pressure so that you can get to actual change. That's what Martin Luther King did. And we need that change desperately. As a new study just showed, we can save 68,000 lives a year if we do Medicare for all. Nothing else is universal health care. That's a giant difference. We've got to get the money out of politics,
Time's up.
and we've got to
Thank
get
you,
Medicare
Mr.
for all.
Uygur.
Cenk2020.com.